Good evening and welcome to the Bellevue City Council meeting for Monday, June 26, 2017. The first item on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise. And our Pledge of Allegiance will be assisted by David Hurst. If David Hurst from Scout number 260, if you come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then please remain standing for the invocation by Father Harold Busey, St. Bernadette Church, 7600 South 42nd Street.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Father, where did he go? Please come forward.
Let us pray. Lord God, watch over us as we gather for this meeting. Guide the members of this council as they deliberate about issues of importance to our community. Grant them a spirit of collaboration and cooperation in their deliberations and decisions. Help them always to seek the common good above their individual interests. In this time of summer, with many activities and travels, we ask you to watch over all of the residents of our city, especially the young. Keep them safe as they re-energize themselves with a variety of restful and refreshing endeavors. I ask your blessing upon those who, in our community, who are suffering from illness and infirmity, from lack of work or work lacking meaning, from declining health and energy. I ask your blessing, especially these days, on those who suffered loss and hardship for the tornadoes of a week ago. Guide them as they recover. Uplift their spirits at this time. And send a spirit of generosity and solidarity to others in our community to help them in their recovery. I ask you to blessing on all those who serve our country in the military services, especially those from our local community. Place your protective hand around them as they face a variety of dangers while serving the mission. Lord, may all we do today and each day serve to give you glory and to serve the needs of our community. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Busey, and thank you, David Hurst. Item number 2 on our agenda. Sabrina, please call roll.
Mr. Hanson?
Here.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mr. Shannon?
Here.
Mr. Preister?
Here.
Mr. Burns?
Here.
Mr. Modry?
Here.
This meeting will be conducted according to the Open Meetings Act, posted the entry to the council chamber. Item 3, approval of agenda, consent agenda, minutes, and advisory committee reports.
Sub-item A is the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the agenda.
Second by Mr. Shannon. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item B is the approval of the consent agenda. The following items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion unless a City Council member or a citizen requests its removal, in which case it will be placed in the agenda in its normal sequence. Sub-item 1 is the approval of minutes of the June 12, 2017 meeting of the City Council. Item 2, approval of claims. Item 3, the semi-annual report of the LB 840 Citizens Advisory Project Review Committee. Madam Mayor or council members, are there any of these items you'd have removed from consent status?
See none. Mr. Burns.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Mr. Modry. Questions or discussions? See none. Mr. Mangiamelli.
I believe I said June something other than the 12th, did I?
No.
Okay, June 12 council meeting, thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 4 is under consent agenda. Item 5, special presentation. 5A, Tim Burke, OPPD, request for financial assistance for the Military Awareness Campaign. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. Recently, within the last couple of weeks, myself and Mr. Burks, the assistant administrator for the City of Bellevue, attended a military tag committee meeting down at the Greater Omaha Chamber, and one of the presenters there was Mr. Burke, the CEO and president of OPPD. Mr. Burke is just now going on and he'll tell you more about this, but he's beginning a campaign that basically talks about the whole metro area of Prosper Omaha, I believe it is. But one of his focuses is really Offutt Air Force Base and the economic bearing that we have with Offutt, not only for just the people at Offutt, but also all of our guard units and all that. And there's representatives there from Offutt and all over. The presentation was very interesting, and I thought, it'd be a good idea to have him start out with maybe our city, which is right here. Now, normally the mayor would attend that, but she was also, you might want to comment before we get started, but the mayor was also in Washington, D.C. with some of the folks from downtown working on preserving Offutt when an upcoming BRAC might happen in the year 2021, and Tim is probably looking at that too. One last note about that, and I was kind of surprised about the, when you look at all 50 states and they talk about the most military-friendly state, Nebraska ranks number 43, which is not very good. So, but Mayor, you might want to say that where you were and what you did there too, just before you start. So.
Yes, so the National Conference for Military Communities or Defense Communities was in Washington, D.C. last week, and I attended with the Governor's Commissioner of Military Communities and also Jeff Mikesill from the Greater Omaha Chamber. And it's all about partnership, regionalization, and working together, not just Bellevue and the base, but the entire metro area working together. And there's a lot of partnerships that we need to work on, saving money, becoming more effective and more efficient. And that's going to take all of us to do that. It's all yours, Mr. Burke.
Well, good evening. As Councilman Hanson said, my name is Tim Burke. I'm President and CEO of Omaha Public Power District. And a couple weeks ago, we did, as part of our military TAG stands for Target Advisory Group. Several years ago, when I had the opportunity to chair the Economic Development Council for the Greater Omaha Partnership, we really identified a targeted advisory group around military services, and what was going on at Offutt Air Force Base. And part of that, the Omaha Partnership essentially engaged a consultant called Cassidy and Associates to focus in on BRAC-related issues and activities relative to the base, to really do an assessment of the base on behalf of the community so we could help in some way to find ways in which we could help that base be more attractive during a BRAC. And a BRAC is a base realignment that periodically the United States government undergoes, and most recently in the President's budget for 2021, he has identified a BRAC to occur. So the consultant is working on a variety of different things. Many of the things the City of Bellevue and Sarpy County and others have supported, which would be the levee work that's being done there, including the work to lobby around increased runway and that construction project that's ongoing. That makes that base even more attractive during a BRAC realignment activity. One of the pieces that we do control as a community is how our community accepts the military and the military services. And so one of the items that came out of the strategic plan of the military TAG was to really create a community awareness, not just for the City of Bellevue, but across the whole eastern Nebraska region, or really western Iowa region. And so we began to start this dialogue with the military TAG members. Many of them may be defense contractors that don't participate in Prosper Omaha, which is the economic development funding engine for the Greater Omaha Partnership. And so we are beginning that work to try to generate somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to really create a community awareness program to talk about not only the value and the benefits of Offutt Air Force Base, but the economics and the impact of the economics and taxes and sales taxes, but also the social value and benefits, and really make sure the community as a whole knows about Offutt Air Force Base and the Strategic Command and the value and the benefit of that. So we are starting down this process to begin to develop this campaign This campaign today is not part of the Prosper Omaha activity. Those funds have already been identified for current economic development initiatives. This would be in addition to that, and that's why we're trying to do some fundraising around that activity. And our hopes would be is that we would try to fundraise over a 2-year period of time and then make these kinds of initiatives part of the Prosper Omaha campaign to begin with. And so we're currently going through a strategic foresight process in 2017. And beginning 2018, I'll be out trying to raise money again for Prosper Omaha, but in the tune of about, $25 to $30 million. That'll look at economic development over the next 5 years. So this campaign is really kind of resurrected based on the announcement of the president to look at a 2021 BRAC. And we are beginning to create that strategy about what we can control and how we can create a variety of community awareness around that. And so I made that presentation. I've asked the TAG members to go back to their organizations and see if there's an opportunity for them to assist in the funding, and we're looking for a 2-year commitment and fund. And so we can begin in the fall of 2017. And our intent would be we would really begin to look at the birthdays of the 4 military services in September, October, November, I think August, September, October, and November. And obviously in November, we also have Veterans Day. So to do a very clean and robust social media campaign, and then in 2018, really begin to focus in on a broader communication and community-wide awareness campaign.
Mr. Hanson.
And Tim, I know this was brought up, but the economic impact off it, do you have those figures approximately for that, of what it is?
It's in the billions. It's in the big Bs. It's in the $3 billion impact to this community and to this region. And so one is to try to preserve that as best we can, and the other is to let the community know that. I'm not sure if we did a survey today, how many people that pay taxes and do a variety of things in this community, which I reside, and in this county which I reside, would really understand the impact of a base closure and the impact of this community, whether it's housing values or sales tax impacts. And as Mayor Sanders well knows, not only do you see a reduction in revenue in those kinds of situations, but you actually have increased cost, because some of those realignments may have to come back to a governing body, which you then have to support a variety of the activity around that. So it's really trying to be proactive. It's trying to go on the offensive and begin to develop our community awareness, which is part of the BRAC analysis that occurs, not only the physical and the military impact to BRAC, but also the community and the social impact as well.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Burke. I appreciate you being here and giving that information. It's, I think, useful to us as a council, and sometimes the public isn't aware of the things that the council is doing or that the mayor is doing. There are many meetings, many opportunities that we are taking advantage of to make sure that we do all we can for economic development and for our community. So I thank the mayor and Mr. Hanson. I'd also thank you, because I think your presentation here is helpful to the public who are seeing this on, or will see it later on television too. But aside from that, let me also thank you and all of the OPPD employees, because we went through a tornado that was very devastating, not only to Offutt Air Force Base and the costliness there and the airplanes and the hangars that were directly impacted, but also the civilians and the people that were hurt. The poles that went down, the 4th, I believe I read in the paper, worst storm in OPPD's history. So this was not just a little wind passing through town. This was pretty serious, and people whose lives were impacted, and their electricity being out is fully restored. And I know some of your employees were working on Father's Day and all through the weekends, day and night, to make sure we had power. So please extend to all of the OPPD employees, from the mayor, from all of the council, I believe, our gratitude, and from the people of Bellevue and Offutt.
Very good. I will do that. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Preister. Mr. Modry.
Thank you, Mr. Burke, for what you're doing in this effort, as well as Councilman Preister said, the yeoman's effort in recovering us from the storm. You mentioned this money would be outside of the Prosper Omaha effort. So this will be set aside and dedicated to this military awareness
Absolutely. Very focused.
effort.
And our intent is to really, as we begin to think about this and preparing for the 2021 BRAC, over the next 2 years, that campaign will end. And so our intentions would be to take these kinds of activities and roll it into the next Prosper Omaha initiative, and raise the money for that very specifically, for other BRAC-related items as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Shannon?
I want to thank Mr. Burke for having someone of your stature lend your support to an effort like this. Many of us here are retired military veterans, and we appreciate what Offutt does. 10,000 employees out there at the base. They generate a lot of business in the community, and we'd be devastated without them. So very important that we keep them. I think that all of us in our speaking engagements, in our activities, try to make sure that everyone understands the impact. And I think that each group or entity supports this effort in various ways. And so that while the mayor travels to Washington, D.C., and we give speeches and make sure we get the word out in the community, I think perhaps it's more the role of the business community to support the kinds of efforts that you're bringing forward here, and that we need our businesses to step up and do things like this. I'm not sure in a year when we're borrowing $24 million to balance the budget for the city that spending $10,000 unbudgeted right now is probably the most fiscally responsible thing that we as stewards of the citizens' money could be doing right now. But certainly we support the effort. I commend you for bringing it to us. We'll have to see what the wishes of the council are, but yeah, I think this is something that the business community needs to take up and run with.
Well, I certainly understand that from a business operator of your public power district. We have a commitment not to have a general rate increase for 5 years, and as we're under those similar kinds of financial constraints internally, our perspective is you really have to also think about the future and be proactive and be offensive in the times that you need to be offensive and in this kind of strategy. And so we're certainly we participate in Prosper Omaha. I personally, and I know Mayor Sander has too, I'm personally committing my dollars to this campaign. I dropped my check off at the chamber this morning because I feel that strongly about it. We also have military men and women that have served in the armed services working for our company that are current reservists, and it's really kind of twofold. One is to say the awareness about what's going on at Offutt Air Force Base and the impact of it, but it's also about what's going on in our businesses. And if not for those folks that have that kind of service and commitment, our organization may not be as strong as it is today. And many of the folks that you may have seen do some of the work that Councilman Preister talked about have come from the military and that military background. And so it's a number of ways in which we, at least at OPPD, are planning on recognizing our employees who provide that service. And to look at it as a recruitment strategy and as a recognition strategy for our men and women that have been committed to the military service. So there's a variety of kind of awareness components to this, but obviously the city has to make their decision on whether or not they want to financially participate or not. But we'll certainly be reaching out to the business community members that are not part of the current Prosper Omaha as well.
Mr. Burke, I want to say again, thank you very much for what OPPD has done for the city, and again, on a very personal note, what you have done personally. I had the great opportunity to be in Monterey, California a few weeks ago, and we drove by Fort Ord. Fort Ord was told there wouldn't be a BRAC 20 years ago. And then there was a BRAC and they were on the list. Department of Defense only has so much money to close a base down. And then the cities are left with hundreds of millions of dollars in demolition. That is the entrance into Monterey. And so Monterey's not too happy about it. Visually, it looks really bad. $10,000 is an investment so we can prevent that from happening and costing us hundreds of millions of dollars. So thank you. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Burke, I'd also like to say thanks to the men and women of OPPD for what you did last week. It was truly, I think, a miracle. The men and women there had to work long days, long hours, be away from families and stuff like that, so I appreciate it. This campaign, I think, is outstanding. I think when we get the metropolitan area to stand up for our men and women out at Offutt, I think it's just the right thing to do, the right direction to go. We've got to work hard to keep Offutt here. The active military, the retired military are such a huge part of our communities, and it's just not Bellevue. It includes Omaha and the whole metropolitan area. So I think this is a very good campaign, and I think we need to support it, and hopefully we'll never see any type of reduction from Offutt. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. And I do want to add, about an hour ago, Jim Risto from the Bellevue Chamber called and wanted us to voice that they are in full support of this. So he just wanted to go on the record that the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce is in support of these efforts. Mr. Mangiamelli.
Sub-item 1 is the approve and authorize the mayor to sign the memorandum of investment, 2-year pledge statement for a 2-year contribution of $10,000, being $5,000 each year for the next 2 years from community betterment funds.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. And a second by Mr. Preister. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
Vote is 5-1.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Item 6, liquor license.
Item A is Siam Cuisine, Inc., doing business as Siam Cuisine, application for a Class I liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits on sale only at 11796 South 25th Street in Bellevue, and for Harvey Halfhill as manager.
Hello.
Welcome. State your name and please sign in as well.
My name is Harvey Halfhill.
Would you like to say a few words on behalf of Siam
Siam
Cuisine?
Cuisine.
Mhm.
My wife and myself just took over in January. We're here to ask you for a liquor license to help create revenue for us in Bellevue.
Are there any questions from the council? Mr. Shannon.
Yes, sir. I had opportunity over the last week to visit the restaurant. For anyone that hasn't been there, they've got a great lunch buffet. The buffet was very clean, service was very quick, staff was very friendly, great experience. So I want to thank you for that. Always glad to have new people willing to jump into the Bellevue business community and do a good job. So we appreciate that. I do have a concern over this application, all right?
Okay.
And my concern is that in talking with your staff, they tell me that you're only around on Saturday and that you're going to be the manager that's controlling this license.
No, I'm actually there from 4:30 p.m. till close. I do
Every
have
day.
a full-time job.
Okay,
My wife is there from open to close. She's the cook. Our waitress has been there for 12 years. She's worked with the previous owner for over 12 years. But yes, I am there from 4:30 to close.
okay. And does the restaurant currently have a liquor license, or is this a
Nope.
new addition?
This is, when we bought the restaurant, they told us, the previous owner said you could use our license until it expires. I contacted the liquor commission, they said no, so we covered everything up, and I've been trying to get a liquor license since January.
All right, and based upon your due diligence, what percentage of your revenue do you anticipate to be through liquor sales?
Well, I have quite a few customers that keep asking when I'm gonna get it. I'm hoping anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month. But without previous knowledge, I don't know.
And with you being the manager that's responsible for this, what kind of training program do you anticipate putting in place to make sure everyone understands the rules?
Anything the liquor commission asks me to do, I will do.
All right, sir, thank you.
there any other questions? Mr. Preister?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for appearing and answering the questions. When I looked at the application, two things stood out, and I think you partially answered one. It had denied twice under TOP, T-O-P, and I had to ask our clerk, that was the temporary operating permit, and I think you just said you tried to get licensed under the previous owner. That's what was denied, so it wasn't anything that was a serious violation, and I just wanted to check that. The other thing that I saw that was unique or unusual for me, you had listed the amount of stock, and I'd never seen that on a liquor application before. Is this a company that's owned by other investors and they have
It's
stock?
just owned by my wife and myself. The incorporation is owned by us.
Okay.
We bought the entire corporation. And from what I remember from filling out the paperwork, they asked for the percentage.
So you were just giving additional information and
Yes,
giving
sir.
a stock? Okay, very good. Thank you for helping me.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and open for public hearing at this time, if you want to just step aside. I'll now open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this, please do so at this time.
I just make one comment.
Mr. Sullivan.
Just to answer Councilman Preister's issue on the stock, anybody with 25% or more of stock has to be listed almost like they're an individual applicant. They check the background of everybody with more than 25%.
Right, but I've never seen a stock amount, a dollar amount listed. Percentage I've seen, but I had just never seen a dollar amount, so it was just unique.
Is there anyone that would like to speak at this time? I see none. I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that we recommend approval to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, Sain Cuisine, application for a Class I liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits on sale only at 11796 South 25th Street, Bellevue, Nebraska, and for Harvey Halfhill as manager.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion or questions? Mr. Modry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'll be abstaining from voting on this item and also 6B for religious and personal reasons.
Any other questions or discussion? See none, please vote.
5 yes votes, 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Item B, Willow Springs Bottling Company, Inc., doing business as Cornhusker Beverage Mart. The application for a special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits during a reunion being held in the Bellevue University Muller Edmond Building, 1000 Galvin Road, on August 26, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Is there anyone here from Cornhusker?
Good evening. My name is Jim Subject. I'm the manager of Cornhusker Beverage Mart. I've been that for almost 50 years. This is the same party that we've done probably for 15 years in a row, and we've never had any problem with it. It's basically a military-based reunion where they all get together, but nobody wants to have the liability, so they want to hire people like us to make certain that there's no problems.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? I'll see none. I'll go ahead and sign in, and I'll open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time. See none. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that we recommend approval to the Nebraska Liquor Commission, the Willow Springs Bottling, Inc., doing business as Cornhusker Beverage Mart. The application for a special designated liquor license to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits during a reunion being held in the Bellevue University Mueller Administrative Building, 1000 Galvin Road, on August 26, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Second by Mr. Shannon. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
Five yes votes, 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Item 7, none. 8, none. And 9, none. Item 10, public hearing on matters other than ordinance.
10A is the public hearing regarding St. James United Methodist Church, represented by Edward Birchfield, in the matter of the appeal of a denial of a temporary waiver of sidewalk construction at 4343 Cape Hart Road.
Thank you. If you could state your name for the record, please.
Ed Birchfield. I'm the President of the Board of Trustees for St. James United Methodist Church, and I'm speaking on behalf of our congregation, many of whom are with us tonight. You notice the brown shirts. As I think many of you know, St. James has been a part of the Bellevue community since 1957, so coming this November will be our 60th year here in Bellevue. The church is requesting a temporary waiver of the sidewalk construction on our new church site, which is at 4343 Cape Hart Road. We've already poured 441 linear feet of sidewalk on the developed portion of the property that we're building on. We are requesting the temporary waiver for the western 432 linear feet of sidewalk remaining on the undeveloped portion of our property, and we're also asking for a waiver on 43 linear feet on the east side of our main driveway as you come in. We are seeking the waiver in accordance with section 28-34, which is a code for City of Bellevue. We did submit our request through the Office of Public Works, and as you know, that was denied. So we're coming here asking for the waiver. Let me just very quickly cover both those two areas. On the east part, the 43 linear feet, as you go to the east towards our property line, there's about a 10-foot drop-off. And we have so far during construction over almost the last year, we've put additional dirt up there, and most of the time when it rains, it washes right back down the hill. If we put a sidewalk towards that property line, there would have to be some type of retaining wall to hold that in place, or eventually the sidewalk would wash out. On the west 432 linear feet that we're requesting a waiver on, phase one of the church's master plan, which we talked about when we first came to the council about a year ago, takes us about halfway across the northern portion of our property. Phase two will take us the rest of the way, and we plan to do that in about 5 years. We currently have, as I said, 441 linear feet of sidewalk in place and poured, and it is truly the sidewalk to nowhere. There are no sidewalks on Cape Hart Road from 25th Street to I-80. Extending the sidewalk another 432 linear feet at this time just seems to make no sense and serves no useful purpose. The only thing west of our property line is farmland. And even when we complete phase two and add the additional sidewalks, which we'll do at that time, will still be just farmland and nowhere for the sidewalk to go. St. James is very much in favor of sidewalks, safe sidewalks. In fact, last Friday, we replaced 11 sidewalk panels at our current location at 1501 Franklin Street. So what we're not in favor of is building sidewalks that we don't think will be used, at least for the next or for the foreseeable future. We are also on a very tight construction budget, and delaying the western part, or this phase two part of the sidewalks, would save us much needed funds that we need for construction. Are there any questions?
Any question for Mr. Birchfield? Mr. Preister.
Or a comment. I certainly don't want churches to have to expend those hard-earned funds that they don't need to expend. We here, though, have heard over and over again about sidewalks to nowhere, and we have granted waivers in the past, and so has our Public Works Director. We have drastically cut down on those waivers, and we are trying now to infill and put sidewalks in so many parts of the city that at one time somebody else said it was a sidewalk to nowhere. So eventually they will be sidewalks to somewhere, and we do have to start somewhere. And so It's not an easy question to answer, but I think we need to put in sidewalks every place that we can. And it's no reflection on the church.
Right.
It's just safe streets, safe pedestrian transportation. And though it's not used right now, eventually that area, like all, will be developed.
And like the waiver that you would do through public service states that at that time when the city takes that over and there's a sidewalk group or commission, whatever it's called, then you say that we'll put them in at that time. So we would simply, we're once again just asking for that waiver for that second half of the sidewalk, which we would be, if we didn't put it in, we'd be required to do it when that time comes.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Modry.
Thank you. Dean or Chris, are there any plans in the work for the properties on either side of this church property for any upcoming developments or anything that we're aware of?
Not directly east or west of the property at this time. Across the street to the north, Liberty subdivision is going in,
Right.
and they will be required to have a sidewalk along Capehart Road as well. Along south of this property, along 48th Street, the Bell Lago subdivision is in process now.
Right.
They will be required to put in sidewalk along 48th Street. The 20-acre property just south of where Bell Lago is, where there's just one house, had to put in the sidewalk along 48th Street. So we are seeing that area fill in. Again, nothing right next to this property at this time we have in the works, but there are other properties in the area that are under development or will be soon that will be required to have sidewalks.
Mr. Shannon. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm
Modry.
sorry.
Continue.
Thank you. So this is a request for a temporary waiver, right? So that
Correct.
What the period is, what, 5 years or whenever you develop that other portion?
Phase 2 will be in 5 years,
Okay.
which would finish the western part. And on the eastern side, when you go there, it's that drop off.
Right, I've seen that.
And that's those storm sewers along Capehart, they just dump into that property next to us in that runoff.
Just, yeah, runs through there. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, I'm a little torn both ways, I guess. I don't see the need to have a sidewalk sitting there weathering and stuff for 4 or 5 years, if we don't have to.
Hence the temporary waiver.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Shuchuk, we do have curb and gutter along this area where he's asking for a temporary waiver?
Yes, we do, and that's why Public Works denied the waiver. That's their policy. If there's curb and gutter, the Public Works Director will not approve the waiver.
Mr. Birchfield, with 2 subdivisions going in around you and other properties starting to fill in already, I can appreciate the fiscal constraints and not wanting to spend the additional money immediately. What if instead of a sidewalk waiver, we were able to grant you an extension to put sidewalks in? Would something like that meet the requirements of the church so that if we gave you to the end of the summer of 2018, say, would that satisfy the need for you to have more time to get the money to put the sidewalks in?
I mean, anything that allows us to do that, the answer is yes. It's just, once again, 432 feet of sidewalks that won't get used. You're talking about 48th Street, which is down the road and to the left, and Denny's developing the 288 homes across the street from us. We know that, but it's just, we know when we build phase 2, which we're going to do, that we will then put them in because it's part of the plan. But it's not next year. It's within the next 5 years.
I appreciate that, but did you watch the development of Giles Road out in Papillion? They built a 4-lane divided road and put the infrastructure in place, and then all of a sudden everything filled in around it. All right, so that's how cities are built, is we have to put the infrastructure in place and then things fill in around it. So having this infrastructure there will promote the development of the area because they're seeing other things happening.
Yeah, we would have greatly appreciated if Bellevue had had the infrastructure when we moved in, because there's no sewers. There was no water. We had to pay to get the water up the hill. So there is no infrastructure south of Capehart Road. North of Capehart Road empties into Quail Creek. But all of us on the south side, we have no infrastructure to use.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. This does not seem like an unreasonable request at all. I mean, basically, they're just saying in the next 5 years, when we're gonna go ahead and do the rest of the development, we'll put it in. It seems very unreasonable to put the sidewalk in now, and in 5 years from now, you might have to rip it out and put a new sidewalk in, and it doesn't go anywhere. That area, like he said, on that south side, there's no infrastructure there. On the other side, where Legacy is going, Legacy Homes, and on the Largo and all of that, they have that infrastructure, but there isn't any on that side of the street. So it doesn't seem like a outlandish request to me. So I'd be supportive of that waiver, on a temporary waiver for 5 years or until they get it developed. You might even do it sooner, develop within, you're saying when it's developed.
If we could find more contributors, we'd do it sooner.
If I could, I'm going to open for public hearing at this time. We still need to do that. So anyone else that would like to come up to speak, please do so at this time. There's a lot of you here. Pick one. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Russ Tompkins. I'm the pastor at St. James United Methodist Church, and I do appreciate you hearing our waiver. And I've worked on this project. I've been at St. James. This is my 15th year. And God had given me this vision to build this church 12 years ago. So it's been a long time, and it's been a struggle. And several times we have thought the project was going to end, but God didn't have that in his mind, and so we're keeping going. But God only works through people, and the good people you see behind you that are wonderful supporters of Bellevue and of all of you have put a lot of their own personal sweat and blood and money into this. And so I would just speak in favor of this temporary waiver. We're not asking to not, pay our fair share, to not put in the sidewalk. But in the future, when we do our phase 2 part of our building, which is going to be 1.5 times larger than the current building that I'm sure many of you have driven by and seen, which we hope to be celebrating and worship in about a month and a half in that new building. So I hope you all come by, and I'll give you a personal tour. But at this time, we just don't know. We have some conceptual ideas of the building. I think Mr. Hanson is correct that if in the future we find that we need to tear up this sidewalk that's been in place for several years for whatever reason, it would be a shame to have to do that. And so at this time, we'll just ask for a temporary waiver until such time as that land is developed, at such time as we're ready to build. So I appreciate you letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? Come on forward.
Hi, my name's George Bolter. This is more of a question for the Public Works. Who owns the sidewalk once it's built on a construction project? Does it become the property of the city, or is it still their property?
The responsibility to maintain the sidewalk is the property owners.
So they'll own it in perpetuity?
Correct.
Okay, and that goes for any business in town?
Yes.
Now, what about the main street on the sidewalks out here? Does each business own a section, or does that belong to the city?
I believe there's an agreement in place for the city to maintain it. I believe that's correct.
I was just curious because, depending on how the businesses go and depending what part of the area we're trying to develop, it comes into a bit of a cost. And I understand what they're saying. I would definitely defer having the sidewalks installed with the end date of having them install the sidewalks later on. I've done major projects before, but, I guarantee that they will install them, because of now I know the rest of the story, that they actually own it. But I also see their point too. You install something here 5 years from now, you get a washout and those sidewalks fall apart. That's a huge cost to that church to try to replace those. And it sounds like they're going to need to put a retaining wall in. That would be probably something a civil engineer will need to look at on the one piece there. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I have you sign in, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Is there someone else that would like to speak?
Honorable Mayor Sanders, Mr. City Administrator, esteemed council members, my name's Herb Evers. I am the Safety and Security Chief for the Board of Trustees for St. James United Methodist Church. The only thing I want to say about this asking with this temporary waiver is that it will have no effect on public safety if we are not required to put in that sidewalk.
Could you please sign in, Mr. Evers, as well?
I will.
Thank you.
Chuck Frederick, 1511 Madison Street. I'm not a member of St. James Church. My father-in-law is, but it sounds so simple to me. Is if the sidewalk goes nowhere, don't make them do it until it goes somewhere, until something is there. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to. They keep talking about it goes nowhere. Let them have it go nowhere until there's something for another hookup for the sidewalk. It's that simple. Thank you.
Mr. Frederick, would you sign in, please? I do need to have that on the record. Thank you.
I thought I did, but.
Mr. Sullivan.
Chris, on our subdivision agreements, undeveloped lots, do we go up to 6 years and then they have to be paved? I think that's what we've done.
Yeah, I believe that's what we did. Any vacant lots after 6 years, the developer or the SID would be required to pay for those and install them.
Having said that, do they even have a requirement at this point to do it before the 6-year point?
Well, they have a requirement now because this is essentially the front property line and it's all one lot. If it was cut into 2 different lots, then they could stop right where they are. But it's one lot, so that the whole frontage would have to be paved.
It's a matter of the city code. It's a requirement there. They didn't do a subdivision. It's just a city code requirement when construction is ongoing or square footage is added to a building. The requirement is for a sidewalk to be installed.
Mr. Shannon.
Mayor, I would make a motion that,
I'm still open for
okay.
public hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
My name is Jerry Moore. I'm a member of St. James United Methodist Church, and I live at 13010 South 29th Place in Bellevue. I've driven out there. It seems like there is far more sidewalk now than anyone is going to use for years to come. It is to St. James's benefit to have sidewalks connecting us to the surrounding community. But right now we don't have that surrounding community. And we don't know when that surrounding community is going to come. So when we do expand, which it surely will, as the community builds up and more people start coming to St. James West, and we develop that new area, then, obviously we are going to want, that's going to be a part of our mission, is to connect with the surrounding community. But right now, that's just a waste of our money, to build a lot of sidewalk. And if we build the sidewalk, are we going to have to keep it clean when it snows? Yes? Mm-hmm. Have you seen how much sidewalk we already have that we're going to have to keep clean, that nobody is going to use, but we're going to have to keep, that's a pretty good sized job already. If we have to build sidewalk all around, that's going to be almost a full-time job, during the winter time to keep it clean. And that is, with no roads to help kind of provide a stabilizing force, that's just going to cause that means we'll probably have to replace a lot of it when we do get around to developing the new part of the church.
Thank you. Did you sign in? You did? Thank you so much. If there is no one else, there is, please.
My name is Dan Lalati. I too am a member of St. James Church, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the waiver. One of the positions that I occupy with this building campaign is to keep in contact with the general contractor as well as Ed Birchfield, because I'm kind of watching how the money goes. And I think, as was previously spoken, if any of you have built a home lately, you know the costs that are in there. And for us to expend monies that could be put off and maybe put towards a more vital use is the reason why I would ask that this board would go ahead and grant that particular waiver. We're not trying to shirk any kind of building requirements. When I built my home, I had to have sidewalks. I had to have a driveway. We know those are requirements. So all we're just asking as a church and as good stewards is that we be allowed to use the money to where it can be best used, and we not be forced to put in this existing sidewalk at this time.
Thank you.
Thank
And be
you.
sure to sign in. Thank you so much. Mr. Shannon. Oh, anybody else? I see not. I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Sullivan.
Just before you guys make a motion or discussion, just a couple of thoughts. One is I think you probably ought to take each sidewalk separately, as in at the property to the east, the 47 feet. I don't think that would have anything to do with the western improvement, and we need to dispose of that somehow. Secondly, with respect to the west side, and just from what I'm hearing in the chambers, I think, to be consistent with our other subdivision agreements, I don't think there's a problem with 6 years, with the exception that it's 6 years or upon any improvements, prior to any building improvements being put on that property, whichever occurs earlier.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I like what Mr. Sullivan's saying. The only thought would be, could another trigger be if something else is developed, if something right to the west side of it's developed and we put in a sidewalk, then we would want that continuity for them to fill that gap. So I like the idea of, when they would move forward on their second phase, or, I'll be honest with you, if Mr. Roberts comes to us with a very valid trigger of something occurring out there and would want a sidewalk in, say, 3 or 4 years, or if there's additional development out there, or if there's additional development out there and that we would have connection of sidewalk. I mean, I just hate to have it say, we're not going to do anything. I know in their heart, they're saying 5 years, but we know how some of these things go. It might be 6 or 7 or 8 years. If we start getting development out there, they've put in half the sidewalk. If I understood your linear footage, 432 has been put in, 441 feet of sidewalk's already been put in and 432 is left. So they've done half of it. It looks like more so in front of the church. I just think if there's other triggers that make sense, that they may have to put that in before. If we get someone that develops right next to them and puts in a sidewalk, then we'll have a gap, and it doesn't
But
make
Mr.
no sense to sit there for
And you
6
say
years.
upon approval,
Well, no, I think
upon any improvements?
I think
thought to
Mr.
his-
Cook, which is adding a good point, is if we have sidewalks abutting to the west, then they need to be installed.
Right.
So I'm writing up a
Well,
motion,
I
what you
just-
guys are thinking.
Good thoughts. Chris, we do not have a development agreement on this. We have a conditional use permit.
We have a conditional use permit agreement.
Conditional use permit agreement.
Yes.
Okay, which is in essence a development agreement, and it states 6 years already?
No, it does not address the sidewalk. it requires that the church development be built in accordance with the site plan that was approved. The site plan didn't actually show the sidewalk. I think it's understood that when a vacant lot develops, that the sidewalk is required.
Okay, and this conditional use permit came to us through Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay, then it would be my motion that we return this to planning to modify the conditional use permit so that we can incorporate the two phases, showing phase one requiring the sidewalks that are existing right now, and phase two would be developed when the sidewalks would be added for phase two when the development takes place, or like Mr. Cook said, when some other trigger that would have to be specified in there happens, such as other developments. But let's keep this in the development agreement or the conditional use permit for now, rather than granting waivers where we've already got curb and gutter. I'd like to avoid that if we can.
Mr. Sullivan, your recommendation.
The only problem is that would be inconsistent with our code, because code still requires it unless we create some type of temporary waiver. So I think we need to do it here.
Mr. Hanson.
Well, I agree there. Mr. Sullivan, they've already gone through the planning, they've gone through everything. It was denied. Now they're coming to the council asking for a temporary waiver. So
No.
I think, what?
No, they went through Public Works. They didn't go through planning.
Well, but it went through
Right.
it went through the organization. That's why we're here. I think we need to make a motion to go ahead and either grant it or don't grant a temporary waiver.
All right,
You
then
can
I'll,
put you can put the conditions in there about if there's other developments or when they're ready to do their development, but to send it back, I think it'd be.
Mr. Sullivan has a motion for us to review.
and I'll withdraw mine.
Thank you.
How long is that western piece? How many feet?
432.
400, and let me look at my notes.
32.
432 feet.
And 43 feet on the east side, sir?
And 43 on the east side,
Thank you.
linear feet.
I think I have an answer for the western side. I still don't know what you're going to do with the eastern side.
Do you want to talk?
No, I'll let-
So the motion would be to waive the western 432 feet portion of the sidewalk until the earlier of the occurrence of the following: 6 years from the date of this meeting, or additional improvement on the lot, or development occurs on the subject property. Well, you're gonna have to give me a minute. I need to fix this.
Mr. Mangiamelli, do you have a suggestion?
Well, along the lines that Mr. Sullivan was drafting, I think we do need a date certain, and if 6 years is going to be the magic number, I would say through the construction season of 2023, so that would be like November 30, 2023. Regardless of whether another phase comes in, regardless of whether additional development comes in, a date certain for the construction of
Why don't I just
one or
put-
both.
How about July 1, 2023?
Well, July 1, you've got a lot of time between July 1 and November 30 for a sidewalk to be constructed. After November 30, you're probably not going to be constructing sidewalk.
All right, I'll go November 30. I'm easy.
And who's got a suggestion for the east side?
Mr. Mangiamelli?
It ought to be both.
Exactly the same for both. Just two separate motions. Mr. Preister?
I was just going to clarify, are you suggesting that the only trigger would be that date? Or if development on either side of the property creating sidewalks is put in, that would also be a requirement?
No, as I said to start, the lines that Mr. Sullivan is drafting, but not later than.
Okay.
So if development does not occur, if Phase 2 doesn't occur, it still has to be put in by November 30, my date,
Right.
can change it, of 2023, which would be 6 years from the present.
Okay.
All right, so let me just talk about this openly. and we're gonna try to- It's going to be the earlier of November 30th, 2023. This is for the western part. Development occurs adjacent to the property on the west, which actually I guess is southwest, but, or development occurs on the subject property in addition to any existing improvements for which a building permit has been issued. That work? And then I think for the eastern part of it, it would be November 30th, 2023, or there is any additional development that occurs on the eastern side of the property.
Which would give us something to connect the sidewalk to.
Yes.
That's the problem. You get to the end of the sidewalk and you fall off.
Okay, so let me read the motion and see if somebody wants to make that motion. So, does somebody want to move to waive the western 432 feet of sidewalk until the earlier of the occurrence of the following? November 30th, 2023, development occurs adjacent to the property on the southwest, or development occurs on the subject property in addition to any existing improvement for which a building permit has been issued.
I would make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Shannon.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion, questions?
Discussion.
Discussion. Mr. Shannon.
I think it behooves us in the future to make sure we're addressing sidewalks as these conditional use permits come up and as these development agreements come up, so that we don't have this in the future. I think these things need to be settled up front so that whatever organization or business we're dealing with can, have their plans, have their finances lined up, and not have to go through this in the future. So I think we could have saved this if we'd planned a little better here and addressed these things up front. So whatever checklist we use to make sure that this is addressed in the future, please add that. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Mr. Mangiamelli.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan, would this be an item that should be recorded with the property?
Sure.
For it, so that there's no questions 6 years from now? And should we also have Mr.
Birchfield.
Birchfield and the pastor identify that they understand this motion for the record?
We can certainly say it's subject to their acceptance for us to do that, and then I'll draft it up.
So do we need that added to the motion?
Sure. Just add the same to be recorded with the Register of Deeds.
Are you gonna send me all that?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
So we have the motion, second, discussion. Any further discussion or questions? See none, let's vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
We need a second motion.
Thank you.
Is the eastern portion 47 feet?
43. 43.
Almost done.
So this would be move the eastern 43 feet of concrete until the earlier of the occurrence of the following, November 30, 2023, or development occurs adjacent to the property on the east.
I'll move that.
Mr. Modry made the motion, second by Mr. Shannon. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Do we have amendments?
What's that?
Do you have amendments or anything?
Do you want to approve the
Right, those were
waiver
just-
subject to the amendments?
Right.
No, I think we're okay the way it is.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you. Item number 11, resolutions, none. Item 12, current business.
Item A is the approval of a change order number 1 for the 2017 Bridge Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $29,520.
Mr. Modry.
Mayor, I move that we approve change order number 1 for the 2017 bridge rehabilitation project in the amount of $29,520.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. I'll just give the Methodist Church a minute to leave.
Item B is the approval of temporary construction easement between the City of Bellevue and Sanitary and Improvement District Number 310, Liberty, across part of Lot 2, Daniels Farm Addition.
Mr. Shannon.
Mayor, I move that we approve item 12B.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item C is the approval of a permanent sewer easement between the City of Bellevue and Sanitary and Improvement District 310 Liberty across part of Lot 2, Daniels Farm Addition.
Mr. Burns.
I make a motion that we approve the permanent sewer easement between the City of Bellevue and SID 310 across part of Lot 2, Daniels Farm Addition.
Second.
Second by Mr. Preister. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 13, administration report. Comments must be limited to items on the current report. Are there any questions for Mr. Mangiamelli? Mr. Preister.
Mayor, thank you. More a comment. I want to thank the city administrator, you as the mayor who went on a ride-along today, and all of our city staff. The cleanup has taken up a lot of time. Staff were out there working overtime. The trees, the building debris, all of those things, the planning, the coordinating, it took a tremendous amount of effort. Our first responders were out there. This was a very serious incident and certainly one that everybody contributed to. Council members were out driving around, assisting. I know my brothers were out helping people too. It was a big project and the community pulled together. The community was there, the council, the mayor, the staff, everybody was engaged and still is. Meetings are still going on. For those people who were at the farther end rather than the beginning of the cleanup, somebody had to be last. I apologize that it was you, but it had to be done in a somewhat orderly fashion. And kudos, I think our staff and everybody deserves a pat on the back. This was a huge job, unplanned, suddenly thrust upon us. It's going to be a big expense, and we talk about budget or unbudgeted. This is certainly unbudgeted, and it will be a big hit when all the funds and the bills come due. So, Mayor, thanks to you. I know you did a ride-along today with Public Works. Everybody has been engaged, to all the council members, city administrator, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to give a shout out as well to the police and fire and the sheriffs, and I know Public Works and Permits and Inspection was there once the storm, even though it was the dead of night, they were out there working, getting the streets and the houses secured. So, and the Parks Department did an amazing job, and Public Works, it's just been on end, and I ask everyone for their patience. It will continue for at least a few more months for cleanup and to get back to normal. So, truly like the way to see the public come together, neighbors helping neighbors, and friends helping friends and family. So there was a little bit of a silver lining, but it still will take a lot of patience. So thank you. Any questions for the administration report? See none. Thank you. Moving on to item number 14, public requests to be heard. Any members of the public addressing the council shall abide by council policy resolution number 35 regarding the principles of conduct and decorum, which states any statements made during the city council meeting by the mayor, members of the city council, city official, and employees or members of the general public shall not involve personal, impertinent, or slanderous attacks on individuals, regardless of whether the individual so attacked is elected official or city official or an employee or a member of the general public. And City Code Section 2-68 regarding the manners of addressing the council. Copies of the aforementioned rules are posted outside the council chambers. Speakers shall limit their presentation to 5 minutes. Please come forward. And for the record, once again, go ahead and state your name and sign in.
Again?
Mhm.
All right, you want me to sign in yet again?
Does he have to sign in again? We've got it, but just go ahead and state your name for the record.
George Bolter, 8510 South 13th Street. Just a question for you all. Did this disaster qualify for a percentage-wise for FEMA funds?
So it is up to the city of Bellevue to declare that and submit everything to the county. The county will submit that to NEMA, Nebraska, and then Nebraska will submit that to FEMA. But the phone calls and the meetings that we've had, they're very supportive, and we just need to make sure we address everything and document everything, and that will take some time.
Super. I was just curious because, as you stated, it's going to be a lot of money. It'd be nice if we got a little additional.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck Frederick, 1511 Madison Street. First thing I want to do is give a shout out to the Parks Department. The dog park down, Jewel Park down there at the end of the street down there had some tables that were really pretty bad. And I was going to call and ask if they would do something about that. I have called in the past and they put wood chips there and they were really responsive. This time, before I had a chance to call, they put new tables there because they were kind of broken up and people or kids or dogs could jump on that and hurt themselves. So I think that's one area that I think that we do need another dog park in southwest Bellevue. I think it's time we have another one. There are a lot of people coming down here from other cities, Omaha and Papillion, to our dog park, and which is nice, but I think we need another one back there. And Mr. Hanson's talked about this before. I mentioned it to him. And isn't that much money to do that? I had cataract surgery, so I got to do things a little bit differently here now so I can see. I was going to mention about the people in Bellevue. Our church, Bellevue Christian Center, raised $2,500 for families in our church, but we also participated in helping the cleanup, and they still are. And I think a lot of other churches are doing that, and I think a lot of other organizations are doing a great job, and I just have to commend the people of Bellevue for just sticking together and doing the right thing at the right time and making this a better city and a better people for it. I think, unfortunately, though, the people of Bellevue are getting a short end on some of the things as far as for the finance area. Way back, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were doing things with the dogs, the cats, the pot-bellied pigs, chickens, and we even got national press about that. And some of it wasn't so good. But what happened was that back then I called Bellevue Henry Dorley Zoo South, and which is kind of was. Thank God now we're through that animal situation. Now the only thing is that I think we have a political situation here which is very similar to Washington, D.C., and we're making some decisions or doing some things to some people who really it shouldn't be political, it should be done for the reason it should be done. And I'm just going to state one thing. Well, before I forget, you should look at my website, chuckfrederick.com. I always forget that sometimes. Maybe it'll be in the minutes, but you should look at that and kind of see how I've been talking for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The other thing is that on this, last city council meeting, you had Mr. Shannon step down, which is right. That was okay to do that, but he should have been able to stand up here and talk and defend himself on that piece of property, that situation that he had. And then it said in the Bellevue Leader, it said, "City demands Shannon move on car wash." Well, I think the title should have been "City demands the administration or the city to act on what they should have been acting on," to my knowledge, Mr. Shannon paid $500 to the planning department and received the okay for his plan, but then nothing ever happened. That was for like 15, 16, 17 months. And then he never got his $500 back, but they said the plan wasn't any good. So either he should get his $500 back, or otherwise the plan should be effective. Now, I know he submitted the same plan again, but I think it's time we stop trying to zero in on one person and try to make this a better city. It's time that we drain the swamp just like in Washington D.C. So I think now my new title at this point is Bellevue is actually Washington D.C. West, and I hope that changes because we're a good city, we're good people, and we want to have things done in the right way. Thank you.
Are there others? I'll go ahead and close the public request to be heard. Item number 15, closed session. 15A, real estate negotiation for city-owned property.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the city council go into closed session at this time for the protection of the public interest. The subject matter to be discussed is real estate negotiations for the city-owned properties. And taking part in that, Mayor Sanders, City Administrator Mangiamelli, City Attorneys Sullivan and Buckley, Assistant City Administrator Mr. Burks, Public Works Director Mr. Roberts, Planning Director Mr. Shuchuk, and Finance Director Mr. Severson. And also, I don't know if I can spell that name. Oh, Dunn, Mr. Dunn?
Dan Goley.
Oh.
Dean Dunn.
Dean.
That's right, he just wrote Dunn here, so. Dan Goley. What? Did you have cataract surgery too?
No.
Oh.
He's sitting in for Jeff, so you might as well.
Yeah, we
name
want
All
Dean
right.
Dunn, and I believe Dan Goley is here from the real estate agency.
That's fine, thank you.
Dan Dutton and Dan Goley. John had done Dan Dutton. Dan Dutton.
Dan Dunn, okay. That's all right. No.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second.
Oh, motion second.
Got that, Mr. Burns? Second. So the council, we have a motion and a second, and we need to vote. Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. The city council has voted to go into closed session at this time. The subject matter to be discussed in closed session shall be real estate negotiation for city-owned property. The following individuals will be included in the closed session. Myself, City Administrator Mr. Mangiamelli, City Attorney Sullivan and Buckley, Assistant City Administrator Burks, Public Works Director Dean Dunn, Planning Director Chris Shuchuk, and Finance Director Rich Severson, Dan Gooley with OMNB, Goley, and Dan Dutton from Omni. So the rest, if they could clear the room, we will now go into closed session. Okay, I need a motion to return from executive session, please.
I make a motion that we return from executive session or closed session.
Second by Mr. Cook. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Preister, second by Mr. Cook. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you and have a good night.